Hi there, I'm Jen. This is Remembered Reads, and this is going to be the Book Palate Tag. I was tagged by Scott and Nell from Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, and this tag was created by Fraser Simons from Springboard Thoughts. And I will link to both of their videos below. Question number 1. Sweet. What is a book that made you excited to read more by that author? This is going to be a slightly different answer, I guess. But the person I ended up reading more of was actually a translator. So I read Sarajevo Blues by Sebastian Mehmedinovic earlier this year, and Amil Alcalay was the translator on this. And after reading that, I ended up going and looking for other work that Alcalay had also translated and also his own work, because I found both his translation interesting, but also he had an afterword in that book where he explained his philosophy behind translation, and that was brilliant. So that is my choice. Sour. What book did you initially dislike or after a reread reversed your opinion on? Or on the flip side, what book did you love but on rereading found it lacking? One book that I have altered my rating on Goodreads for every time I've talked about it was Celeste Ng's Little Fires Everywhere. I had that at the library basically the day it came out. I surprisingly got it really quickly, and I read it immediately and thought, okay, this is a compelling domestic story, kind of a book club read. Fun. And at the time, this was before the TV series came out, but it had a lot of booktube buzz, and I realized every additional conversation I had with someone in the comments on somebody's video, I would realize that, no, actually that part was done really poorly, or that was a bad representation of that, or that's not how the legal system works. And I found, so I went from, I think, 4 stars at one point to 3 to 2, to the point that now I saw the ads for the TV series and went, oh, that was awful. But I did genuinely find it very compelling when I was reading it. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, this was not good. That is also an unpopular opinion because people do love that. Bitter. What is a book that you feel is underrated, attacked, or attacked unjustly by popular opinion? Or flip side, just misunderstood? A book that I liked and that a lot of other people also liked, but that I think was misunderstood, was Sebastian Barry's Days Without End. That was, again, kind of everywhere on BookTube a few years ago. And I read it and thought, wow, this is brilliant. It's about these 2 guys, one of whom is a poor Irish immigrant to the US in the 1800s. He joins the military so that he doesn't starve. And he and his partner are in a unit that commits war crimes. They're murdering women and children in their sleep during the American Indian Wars. And they eventually adopt a young indigenous girl. They change her name. They say, oh, we can't be expected to pronounce her name. At one point, they go back from where they're living to the area that her family originally came from. She sees her uncle, who's her last living biological relative, murdered, and then one of the 2 dads says to her, oh, do you want to come home with us? And she says yes, and it's like, isn't that a beautiful moment? And people took the character's narration as genuine when these guys are war criminals. These characters are war criminals. They're involved in genocide. And I saw so many reviews where people were saying, isn't it lovely to see this beautiful gay love story against the Civil War? And yes, there is a Civil War section, but the bulk of it is the American Indian Wars. And 2, they're war criminals. And I thought it was brilliant the way it sort of worked out how people would become war criminals and how they thought they were doing a good thing, but they were actually committing genocide. But I saw so many reviews of people who loved it and said, beautiful love story, and made no commentary about the genocide element. And I know there's a sequel now, and I'm kind of afraid to read it because, I don't know, it really bothered me how many people were saying, look at this great love story, and said nothing about the war crimes, when that is so core to everything that's happening in that book. It's bizarre to me. Salty. What is a book that changed the way you thought about or related to other people, or that made you realize something about yourself that you were not aware of previously? So when I was in high school, I used to take a lot of books out of the school library almost every day. It tended to be nonfiction about wars and science fiction and fantasy. And one day the librarian suggested that I read Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca, which was not my kind of thing, but because she had suggested it, I felt like I had to go home and read it and report back the next day. And I did, and it made me realize that it was not actually painful to read things that were not my idea of a good time. That if I wasn't reading about the Napoleonic War, that was okay, and it might be entertaining anyway, which should be something obvious, but teenage me had this revelation like, oh, doesn't need to have sword fights. So there we go. Optional prompts. Yeah, we're going to do the optional prompts. Sophisticated palette. Choose a book from your favorite subgenre or that has your favorite trope or motif, or just go off regarding a bookish, nerdy thing you like or enjoy. What's my favorite trope or motif? I don't really have a favorite trope or motif. I mean, the cliche is that I really enjoy First World War stories where you have a slightly shell-shocked veteran sitting on a pier, probably somewhere in the Muskokas if he's Canadian. He's probably an amputee and he's probably bisexual. And he's contemplating the meaning of life. And that is a huge pile of can-lit that captures that kind of thing. But Robertson Davies' Fifth Business is, what, my platonic ideal of that kind of story? Maybe? I don't know. I don't think he actually sits in a dock in the Muskokas in that, but, you know. Anyway. Although, hilariously, I don't actually read that much of that kind of book anymore, but I spent such a long time reading nothing but First World War fiction and nonfiction and poetry and everything, and it's burned a spot in my brain. Next up, unrefined palette. What is a book or genre that you consider a guilty pleasure? And then there's a caveat saying you shouldn't actually feel guilty about reading things you enjoy, but my usual answer to this is propaganda, and I think I've said that so many times that it's not interesting. So what I'm going to say is I will enjoy one of my guilty pleasures other than that, and I do think it's okay to feel guilty about enjoying propaganda, so no caveats necessary, is comics format books where the art is fantastic, but the story is possibly gross, maybe offensive, maybe questionable. I'm going to pull out two examples where there's a lot of kind of gross machismo and male gaze stuff that if it were not a comics format book, I wouldn't put up with that in the stories, but because it is comics format and the art is amazing, I still enjoy it, and so it's a guilty pleasure because on the one hand, I don't think I necessarily want to be consuming stuff that is gross on some level. My examples here are going to be Zapin Patel's Paris 2019, Paris 2119. I don't think this is available in English. I was going to say unfortunately, maybe fortunately. And Ergen Gundaz's Taxi Halakari, or Taxi Stories. I think the first volume of this, at least, is translated into English. This book is science fiction, and if you follow me on Instagram, I showed some of the pictures in here, because the art, like armadillos on the metro, how can you beat that? But it's super ridiculous, like I'm going to hold this at a distance, because I feel like there's so much nudity in this that I'm not sure how much of this I can show on screen. But it's such one-sided nudity, like there are panels where it's full, what do you call it, a crotch shot of the woman. But we always see the man with his pants draped in front of him, and there's a bit at the end, there's a point where she's memory wiped and he's going to use his, and the way he's going to get back with her is iffy. It's all questionable. But I love the art in this, so I kind of don't care. I still think this is fantastic. Yeah, I can't show you the most objectionable part because it's relative, it's full frontal, but I mean, and this book similarly, again, I don't know how much of this I can show because, yeah, there's a lot of nudity. This series is about a taxi driver, and each issue, or in some of them there's more than one story, but his passenger tells him a story, and this is an old man who's like, oh, let me tell you about the parties with the French girls in the 50s. And you know what that story is going to be like, right? It's gross. And it's kind of, to a certain extent, it saves itself because the main character, the taxi driver, says, haha, like, I wonder if that was true. But it doesn't completely save itself. And again, now I'm trying to find something that's not naked so I can show you the art. He has like a watercolor style to the art, and I love this. And I love the books he does that he doesn't write. Because, yeah. So yeah, you can write, I will read really sexist nonsense if the art is pretty. So that, I guess, is a guilty pleasure. Next, eclectic palette. What are the top 3 genres you typically read or gravitate towards? I don't know. I hate literary fiction as a label, but I do read a lot of it. Graphic novel is not a genre, but a lot of people use it as one, so I'll say that. Poetry is not a genre, but I read a lot of it. So I don't know. I don't have favorite genres. I read everything. Maturing palette. What is a genre you've read little or none of but would like to sample more? What book, if any, prompted this? Well, I always say that the genre that I don't get along with is anything spiritual, so maybe my goal for next year, or this year, I'm not sure when I'm going to post this, should be to read something that is kind of spiritual. I don't know. Maybe I won't. We'll see. Anyway, that's the tag. This has been going around for a while, so I'm not sure who to tag. Oh, I'm going to tag Leo Bancroft, who just tagged me in another tag. So, and I'm pretty sure hasn't done this. So there we go. And as always, if you haven't done this tag, but you would like to be tagged, please consider yourself tagged. And yeah, that's it for now. Ciao.